Good morning, Colorado Springs. This is another brighter day in the neighborhood. I'm your host, Angela Jones. And today we have an amazing guest to introduce you to. He is one of the reasons this program even exists, Florian de Castro.
Hi, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Otherwise known as Flo. We
Yes.
commonly know you as Flo. And so just describe for everyone what exactly is your connection to Brighter Day.
Sure. So, well, I'm an Asian veteran, immigrant,
Right.
as well as an entrepreneur.
Right.
This was early or late December 2020. Had a cocky idea of, well, maybe I should start a media company. And I managed to buy a radio station, right?
KPPF.
KPPF.
Okay.
So, fast forward a little bit, we got you on board. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a great format to get everybody knowledgeable about who's who in the city.
Right,
And
right.
and that was basically the start of A Brighter Day
Well,
with you.
and if you could, share with everyone sort of this drive or heart behind KPPF, period.
Sure. Well, I've done my research. I used to be in the military for 21 years, and I understand that access to traditional media is very, very expensive. I mean, you've done some advertising, radio, TV, whatnot. It's
Right.
expensive to get on media these days.
Right.
So the idea is that as part of the military, was very good to me. Did pretty well, successfully and financially. Maybe even given the opportunity to give back and drive that cost down so that more people can afford it across the board. Now,
Right.
I'm partial to Asian and minority,
Right.
but still, the idea is that platform, that access should not be limited to, rich people.
Right, absolutely. And part of the focus is you're very it's community based.
Yes.
It's meant to the radio programs, as not necessarily all the music, but the radio programs, the things that listeners will be able to enjoy on KPPF are community oriented.
True. And really, at this point, we've actually switched completely. We're no longer doing music. We did a hybrid format for a while, and that didn't really quite pan out. So we're now a conservative news talk and everything else associated with that, mixed in with providing access to local people.
Okay, well, so and I didn't even realize that shift had taken
That's
place.
pretty recent. I
That's
mean,
pretty recent,
literally November, December timeframe
Got
is when
you.
we started moving into that, and then of course with the idea of getting more listenerships, and in turn, that listenership. Oh, I came here for this show. But now I'm going to stick around and listen to A Brighter Day because I love this format. I love who's the people. I love the host. I love
Right.
who she's interviewing and interacting with. And who knows, maybe I'm one of her guests in the future.
Right. Well, one of the things that I have actually really loved is the opportunity that we have had to get to know so many people who are involved in so many great projects and organizations
Right.
in Colorado Springs. And I understand, besides this and a bunch of your other businesses, that you've recently gotten involved with, is it an Asian Heritage Center?
Yes. So
Okay.
there's a local foundation here called the Golden Lows Foundation. The founder is Cynthia Aki.
Okay.
She's been doing this for over 10 years. I came on board around March of last year, 2020, during, we're still recovering from the pandemic.
Right.
And pretty much I'm not one of the main drivers, but I helped her a lot in to actually secure 8.4 acres in the Cheyenne, Broadmoor area to now house the future Asian Heritage Center.
And so what is that comprised of?
So, well, immigrant from the Philippines. One of my major concern is that my son is first generation American, and it's like, ooh, that's pretty special if you look at first generation American.
Right.
So like a Plymouth Mayflower
Right.
days and whatnot. But I'm concerned that as he gets older, as he has kids, grandkids and whatnot, they're gonna lose that part of who they are, that appreciation of, hey, you're half Filipino.
Right.
Your parents were born both from there. And
Right.
while he's actually visited the Philippines multiple times, so he's
Right.
there. My concern is that his kids and grandkids won't know who that is, short of, Grandpa Poppy, Grand Flo did this and that, and from there.
Right.
So this is an opportunity to actually help showcase that. In addition to that, we've had a good deal number of Asian hate, and I don't really want to go into that, but there is that portion, and a large part of that is ignorance, frankly.
And I think, we can just look back in the last year or two, and that incidents, regarding just racism toward people of Asian heritage absolutely have been in national news. And I think even historically in this area, there has been some issues with Asian racism. And some of that was historical, I think, mostly surrounding the World War II historical events and what have you. But it's not... it's not something that people are necessarily top of mind aware of. And so what I'm hearing you say is not only is it a place for people of Asian heritage to go and maintain their heritage, but also a way to connect people who are not of Asian heritage with Asian history, tradition, things of that nature.
True. I mean, most people don't realize when, the Transcontinental Railroad, built largely a good part with Chinese immigrants, went through Colorado. But is there any landmark or appreciation of that? No, not at all. The Japanese internment camps was actually here in Colorado, and that's a lot of families that were second, third generation Japanese, more American than Japanese, frankly. But they were moved from the coast because there was fears and concerns that they would be part of an uprising. And so those families lost not just their lives, livelihood, businesses, and everything else. So just an appreciation of that, or a knowledge of that those kind of things exist, and good or bad. I mean, the truth is there, and I think it's more of a disservice if you don't actually talk about the truth, good or bad.
Right. Yeah. I was down in New Orleans not too long ago, and they have a World War II, huge. It's like 4 or 5 buildings there, just outside the French Quarter area of New Orleans, and it's fantastic. I mean, and it you really get into, the history, and I think it's pretty even-handed in terms of just stating the facts, but it delved into part of the time that I ended up spending in that museum. It delved into how African Americans were allowed to fight in the wars, but they weren't allowed to participate otherwise fully in the United States because of Jim Crow laws, and how that even at that point in time, people were like, hey, this gave, in the wake of that, we came into the 60s, and it touched on the Japanese internment camps, because the Japanese were trying to expand, and when they aggressed American soil, otherwise rational people got this idea that, hey, you may have contacts over in Japan, and passing them intelligence, so therefore we need to round you up, so you can't do that. And to me, it isn't so dissimilar. I mean, obviously, from my perspective, it became much more organized than what happened after 9/11. It wasn't organized where we were rounding up people who were Muslim or of Islamic, tradition or religion, but there was that same suspicion against a people, and there isn't anything more racist than that. Hey, how you look makes you suspect.
Right. And just your look.
Just your look.
Martin Luther King saying, judge me by my content of my character,
not the color of my skin. I have a dream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's really the case. I mean, you talk about the African American piece, this key airman is one of the examples of that. The other piece too is that most people don't understand, like there wasn't a lot of Asians fighting in the Pacific during World War II.
No.
And for obvious reason, that's part of the concern, where it's like but there's a lot of them that actually did have to go into other theaters, because that was one of the major concerns, is, what if we have an all Japanese or all Asian unit? Will they
Right.
betray us? That
Right.
kind of stuff. It's like, well, a lot of these people were 2, 3, 4 generations removed. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm more American than Japanese or Asian.
And on the flip side, it wasn't, and I'm not saying it never happened, but at least, what I was reading is that same thing didn't happen to Americans who had immigrated, whose ancestors or families had immigrated from Germany.
Right. And actually,
Or Italy.
a good deal number of them
Or
were
Russia.
fighting
Yeah.
in Europe.
Absolutely.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
why? What was the issue with that? But I mean, so that's one of the main things I'm doing right now for the Golden Rose Foundation, and
Right.
to help with more the understanding. So it's going to be an Asian Heritage Center.
Right.
It'll have a Chinese tea house
Nice.
and all the different botanical gardens for the 6 major Asian communities in Colorado.
So how are they going to accomplish an Asian botanical garden with our climate? That's my question.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you look at it latitude-wise, we're
Okay.
roughly the same latitude as Japan.
Okay.
We actually have 2 sister cities, one in Japan and one in Taiwan,
Okay.
in China. We're roughly in the
Latitude,
same
right.
latitude and climate and everything else. So a lot of that stuff.
Is it the same climate? I mean, I've been to Japan. I love Japan.
Yeah,
Japan's one of, I would say, probably, I love going a lot of places, but Japan was one of those places. I've not been a lot of places in Asia, India, and I've been in Japan and part of Turkey. So, gotten a little bit of flavor, but not really what we consider like the Far East
Right,
or,
right.
or East
Pacific,
Asia.
the
Yeah,
Pacific
I've been
Islands.
Pacific because I've been in Hawaii,
Hawaii,
and Guam
yeah.
and Philippines, stuff like that. But not in what you would consider like, beyond Japan.
Right.
Into Eastern Asia. But when I went there, everywhere else I'd traveled up to that point, it was sort of like variations on the European theme, is what it seemed like to me. It was like, oh, I recognize this is Greek or this is Roman.
Yeah.
There was that sort of influence. But when you go to Japan, it's unique. It's just different, and the culture in and of itself it's very, I would say, homogenous, but it's more unified than you might find going into, say, an American city, or even, like when I lived in Hawaii, there were a lot of different Asian cultures there, as well as other cultures there as well, mostly because of the military. We were on Oahu. But there was a lot of blending between the cultures, and it didn't seem as distinct, even though,
Well, and that's actually what most people don't understand is that within Asian cultures, it is very homogeneous. There's not a lot of diversity, which is something we take for granted here, because there is a lot of diversity in the U.S. Different religions, different cultures, different backgrounds, even different languages. Even though English is the primary language, there's differences. You don't see that a lot in the rest of the world, and most people don't see that. I'm glad you picked that up, because it is very distinct. You go to Japan, you don't get a lot of Korean or Chinese influence there. It's largely Japanese.
it's very
Yeah.
Japanese.
So now trying to meld that into an Asian Heritage Center that has, basically Chinese, Japanese, Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Korean influences. Those are the 6 major Asian organizations here in Colorado. How do you do that without offending?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these cultures have been around for thousands of years and have come in contact, both good and bad, with each other. So there is still that level of, he's not Korean, they're not Chinese, even within the Asian community. So the idea with this is, or the guiding principle is like, we could be better knowing more about each other, about our neighbors. And part of the piece that we're going to have in the Asian Heritage Center is the food, because I don't think you've met an Asian yet where, hey, let's go eat, let's go have fun, let's go have karaoke.
Right.
You never really appreciate it until you're actually within that actual culture. But a lot of the foods in the Asian culture here is just Americanized. So it's not like, there's no such thing as General Tso's chicken or orange chicken in China. It's just
Right.
chicken. But
And it's every part of the chicken.
it's every part
On a stick.
Yeah, exactly. Everything and anything. But
Right.
people don't appreciate or realize that until like, oh, well, that's Chinese food. It's like, you know what they call Chinese food in China?
Food. Right.
But I mean, even that understanding.
Yeah.
So that's the idea with the Asian Heritage Center, is to go beyond that
Right.
and be able to know more about your neighbor and who they really are, because there's a lot of stereotypes.
Well, I still am intrigued about that garden. I mean, I know when I was Yokosuka is where I went and visited and stayed with a friend whose husband was stationed there. We spent some time in Tokyo. But, you know, we would see Mount Fuji and, you know, but it's an island. And I don't, you know, I recall it being, I mean, there were some, you know, skyscrapers was very well developed, you know, and we went to like Tokyo Disney and things like that. And so there was a lot of concrete or what have you. But I just recall it being much more lush. You know what I mean? And the type of things that grew. The other thing I really remembered, and I loved, were the like automated food.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
The vending machines.
The vending machines, but not just that, but also when you went up to the noodle stands and like you would pay and then you'd get like a ticket. So you would go in and get, you know, your ramen. And so they were ahead of the rest of us in the, you know, in terms of food delivery before the COVID.
Well, I mean, that's a stereotype, right? Asian stereotype. Oh, they're a bunch of nerds.
No,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's. But yes, I mean, the technology is a really great piece there, and also it's the yin and yang. I'll use that piece. Is that high tech but nature, right? Because of the gardens and everything else, the peaceful relaxation, but then still the high tech, bustling.
But I think it's great. I mean, to me, it was great. Like my friend had a koi pond and a prayer garden, you know, and not, they weren't bonsai trees, but they were trees in her yard that were similar, like shaped, like one would shape a bonsai, you know. And so that was really neat. But I mean, when you and I first got to spend significant time together, it was actually at a cookout. And you had brought lumpia.
Yeah.
And I mean, so food, I think, is maybe that's the big common denominator. You know, I'm from the South. And, you know, we'll go, okay, so here's a good for example. You grow up in Nashville, and there is Nashville hot chicken. I don't know what kind of hot mess they're serving in all kind of restaurants around here that purports to be Nashville hot chicken, but it is not Nashville hot chicken. You know, so I get that, but I think it's, you know, if we can, if anyone can get some authentic lumpia, that will be worth the price of admission all by itself.
Well, ours, the one you've tasted, is as authentic as they come. It's actually a family recipe, a family secret. A lot of people think, oh, you know, egg roll, lumpia, they're all the same. No, they're not.
Not the same.
And each family actually have their price dish or price recipe accordingly for that. And you can have, you know, one Filipino family, oh, that's chicken adobo, but another family would prepare it, it would be completely different.
Right.
So I mean, and I think that's the social part of us, you know, the breaking bread.
Yeah.
Everybody is happier and gets
Right.
together more when they're, you know, sharing a meal type of thing.
Right. And I mean, to me, you know, as much as I'm not going to eat the Nashville hot chicken that's here, since I've tried it, you know, for me, that you know, that imitation is the best form of flattery. And that's why I think we can kind of take away from there. It's like, I was just down in Costa Rica and they had Chinese food, you know, and I think it was like, you know, I butcher Spanish. I'm trying to learn, but you know, it was like basically food China, you know, the way it translates in English. But it was like the food comedia China, you know, de China or whatever. And it wasn't even like Chinese food like we have in the United States. It was this other version of it. But it was the point that people really want to that extent, partake in the culture.
Right.
You know, because getting into enjoying the food, you know, like Thai food or, you know, the Filipino food. And, you know, there's not a lot of Filipino restaurants, which is really a shame from my perspective. But, but just not having that access once you start to sit down, break bread, get familiar. I think it inspires some curiosity.
It does, and actually on the Filipino side, I think that's almost by design because we'd rather have you come over the
your
house,
house.
and spend several hours as opposed to
Yeah.
in a restaurant you only have an hour or two
Right.
really, and maybe even spend the wee hours all the way
Yeah.
till dawn.
So we lived in a part of Oahu. Our neighborhood was predominantly, like most of the people in the neighborhood were Filipino, and that was exactly our experience. I mean, it was big doings. Constantly and multi-generational, multi-family gatherings, and we were always very embraced.
Yeah.
Come in, they feed you, and they feed you, and they feed you, and talking and laughing and games and more food. And it was wonderful. I mean, that's, and then I got to know some people, just, some of the things they do, like Filipinos don't point. They direct with their lips.
Right.
And so there's just, I don't know. I think it's a lot of neat stuff. And
And
so
you-
I hope your Heritage Center kind of gets into some of those things as well.
Right. So the idea of the Heritage Center is actually going to be more high tech.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So I'm largely in charge of the main planning of
Okay.
developing the entire complex.
Okay.
So and I'm a big geek and nerd. I spent 21 years being with the Air Force
Gotcha.
and more so with Space Force with
I gotcha.
Space
I gotcha.
Command. So some of the technology we have is imagine a floor wall to ceiling. The entire wall is a display.
Ooh.
And the idea of this is that you would download the app for the Heritage Center and that you could be there every single day of the week, every single day, and the wall would change as you approach it.
Oh,
So
wow.
say you went there one day and then you went there the next day, and in between that day you did an ancestry.com.
Right.
So now that would potentially track, I'm 23% Asian in China, Mongolia,
Right.
Kazakhstan, whatever.
Right.
As you go visit again, now that's potential information that will change and morph to, hey, you're 20% Mongolian, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Did you know about this about Mongolia? It's like,
Yeah.
no. Did you know that the reason why everybody has that DNA is because of Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, and
Right.
that piece of history where basically he spread and everybody
Right.
he had kids in every single culture.
Right.
Did you know that's why you're showing up 20%?
Right.
No, I didn't know that. So that's the
Wow.
idea of doing that. The other piece is I don't know if you ever, when you were younger, played with the paper dolls where you can change the outfits and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm recreating that virtually.
Oh, wow.
So it will, you put in your dress size, you go into the dressing room, you put in your dress size, and then there'll be a light radar scan of your body, and then it will superimpose to you, and you can see what you would look like in a Japanese kimono, an Indian sari, a Chinese outfit,
Yeah.
for New Year. So you can actually see that, and then if you so like it, depending on the colors and whatnot, you can press a button and it'll order and ship to your place.
Oh, really?
Those are the kind of things that I'm bringing in. And then you talked about the gardens, right? And
Right,
their
right,
heavy
right.
water
Right,
race.
right.
And of course, we have a water issue here in Colorado.
sure.
But there is a technology that will allow you to pull water out of thin air. And that's the kind of things where we're working towards on the center, where it's zero electricity and zero water use, and you can actually produce more electricity and water. Part of the technology there's a technology, most people know renewable energy is solar panel, right, and wind and water and whatnot. Now we're looking at, as you step through the Heritage Center and to the walkways, you're actually generating electricity as you're stepping through.
Oh, wow.
So now, we'll need a lot of power to power every single wall is a display.
Wow.
Every single wall, every single
Are you
table.
doing solar or just this?
It'll be a
kinetic?
combination of solar and kinetic.
Right.
And then we would be able to produce our own fresh water
Oh, wow.
for all the gardens and everything else without
Nice.
taking any more from from Colorado. Colorado's
Yeah, of course.
dwindling resources.
No, and that's really kind of neat because I guess with that technology, it could have other adaptations too, for other types of businesses or people who are trying to do things. Like I would love to plant some trees in my yard. I have a home up in Black Forest that was, raised by the Black Forest fires, before we purchased it. But it's a water issue. My neighbors who have replanted trees, in general, have to truck water in, and I'm not against doing that, but there's just the aspect of it would be great to get out there and put more trees or put trees back out on the land there. But there's that water issue.
Yeah, well, I'll send you the technology. You can produce anywhere from a couple hundred to thousands of liters of water out of thin air.
That is fascinating.
And it's been around for close to a decade.
Is this one of your businesses that you've gotten into?
No, not that kind of water.
Well.
But yeah. No, it's actually so I was a science and technology analyst for the Space Force, and that's how come I know some of this stuff, because they're actually used in the space program.
Right.
To actually produce water out of thin air. Right. So yeah, those are definitely things that.
Well, I'm just blown away. We barely got to scrape the surface with you. So, and I know you're super busy. You've got so many things going on. But if you would do us the favor of joining us another day here, I'd love to have you.
Oh, anytime.
All right.
You know where I'm at. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Flo, and thank you all for joining us. You're with us here on another Brighter Day in the Neighborhood. We're here at the same time and station each week. And until we get to spend time with you again, have a brighter day.